What is going on, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Taboo Table Talk. I'm your host, Krish Mohan, and these are your pre show announcements. I want to let you guys know about some really cool stand up comedy shows that I'm going to be doing, some virtual, some in person, and some. Our whole tours, which is very exciting. We're doing a tour in the springtime, but to get to this month's show, February 3rd, that's today. If you're listening to this on the day that it comes out, I am doing a virtual stand up comedy show. I'm going to be working on new material. I'm going to be polishing up some old material, telling some stories, hanging out with you guys. That's at 8 p.m. It's over Zoom. You grab your ticket an hour before the show. I send you an email with the login information. You come in, you wear some headphones if you can, and you sit back, you laugh. I hear you laugh. You're part of the audience, and it's the closest thing we can get to doing a live performance. And this has been what I've been doing for the last year and a half, 2 years. So if you've been to one of those shows, you know exactly how it works. If you haven't been to one of these shows, then now you know how it works. But February 17th, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. February 17th, I will be at the Bryant Street Barbershop. Osha Dwyer, a good friend of mine, is going to be headlining that show. We've got Garrett Teitelbaum and Alex DePula on that bill as well. These are Pittsburgh comedy legends, you guys. And I don't say that facetiously. I genuinely mean that. These are very dear friends of mine that I have not gotten to share the stage with in a very long time. So if you're in Pittsburgh, February 17th, come to the Bryant Street Barbershop. It's $10 for a ticket. Check out their Instagram for how to send payment information and grab a seat. Seating is going to be limited on that show. And I'm very, very excited to announce that I will be on tour with Ron Placone, my good friend Ron Placone, from April 16th through the 25th. We're going to be doing shows in Pittsburgh, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Burlington, Portland, Maine, Boston, and New York City. So if you're in those cities or around those cities, make sure you grab a ticket. Come hang out with me and Ron. I have not gotten to do a show with Ron in quite some time, so this is really, really exciting. To be on tour with him. I one of the first tours I ever did, one of the first official tours I ever did, was the Indie Bohemian Comedy Tour way, way back in 2015 with Ron, and it was a blast. And I'm looking forward to this as well. So grab your tickets at either ronplacone.com or at my website, krishmohanhaha.com. And if you do go to my website, you can also check out my stand up comedy albums. You can make a one time donation or become a sustaining member, which gets you bonus content, exclusive stand up comedy that doesn't get released to the public, bonus discussion videos, as well as other bonus shows. I'm working on kind of revamping that a little bit and getting more details out. But and thank you for your patience. I know I've been kind of saying that for a little while, but I am a one man solo organization, I guess. So sometimes it takes me a little while to build up these sorts of things, but you can still make donations. You can still become a sustaining member, and you still get cool bonus things. So again, you can go to my website, krishmohanhaha.com. That's KRISHMOHANHAHA.com. All right. Now, onwards to the show. And hello, everybody. Good day, good afternoon, good evening, good night. If that's the time of day that you are choosing to listen to this, I wish you a fond good night, and I hope that you have sweet dreams of destroying capitalism and installing an economic and political system that is here for the people and encourages cooperation, empathy, and compassion rather than the viciousness that we see around the world created by capitalism, neoliberalism, and hyper-individualism. Hello! What a way to start the podcast. I'm Krish Mohan, and you're listening to Taboo Table Talk. We have a phenomenal guest for you guys that's kind of related to the weird little ranty thing that I did at the top. The dream I wish you to have, and the dream I wish was a reality. We have the wonderful journalist and the extremely intelligent Vijay Prashad from the Tricontinental Institute. You can check out his work at thetricontinental.org. Sign up for his email list. It is a delight. It will inform you, give you hope, make you angry, all the things that good journalism is supposed to do, that good art is supposed to do. Elicit emotions that you can sit with and learn and learn a little bit more about yourself, and learn how to handle these emotions and use it as a fuel to drive progress and change. Vijay Prashad, his work does that. I'm super excited to. If you can't tell, like I'm trying not to overly gush, but this was super awesome. This was one of those like fanboy moments for me. It's like I have celebrities that I fanboy over, and all that kind of stuff. But really, my fanboy comes out when I get an opportunity to meet and talk to some of my favorite journalists and activists around the world. And when they want to do my podcast, I get even more excited. So super pumped that Vijay Prashad said yes to coming on this podcast, and we do discuss what neoliberalism is and how it has become the dominant economic force around the world, even in countries like India, the Pacific Southeast is getting taken over by neoliberalism. You kind of see the effects of neoliberalism across the African continent as well, and what it's done to the South American and Latin American countries as well. So we discuss a lot of that, and it's a big topic. So we kind of, I tried to shift the conversation to make sure we cover a few important world events that have happened that have kind of pushed back against neoliberalism. So that was something that I wanted to tackle. So we do talk about the Indian farmer strike. We do talk about the details of that. So if you're unaware of what happened, well, great, you're in the right place. Welcome to the podcast. This is the right spot to be in to learn about what happened with the farmer strike and why the events of that were so important to everything going on in the world now. We also talk about how nations like China are taking a stand against this, and how they're regulating their billionaires, how countries like China and Cuba and other socialist nations have dealt with the global pandemic that we are all facing. And he brings up a few points that if you pay attention to the other regular video and podcast series I put out, Forkful of Noodles, you've been kind of hearing me talk about China. I put out the episodes about China recently, which I have linked the audio to those in the description of the episode if you haven't gotten a chance to check those out. But we do discuss a lot of those. What I discuss in those videos, we discuss in this podcast as well. And obviously, Vijay has a lot more knowledge on that than I do, because Vijay was my source. The Tricontinental Institute was my source for those videos. So, go check those out, because they're very much inspired by a lot of the research and information that the Tricontinental put out there for people and for other journalists to digest and share with everybody. So it might change your perspective on looking at China as a threat, and perhaps start asking the question, well, why aren't we doing some of the things that China's doing, because they seem to be successful? Why aren't we taking that approach and start working our way to making that paradigm shift that a lot of people have been talking about. The paradigm shift from hyper individualism and this Ayn Randian world that we want to create for some reason, right? And that's not the world we need, but it is the world that gives into the selfishness, and the ego, that we have left unchecked in our minds, and to go to a less egotistical, more compassionate, more cooperative, more empathetic, more logical, uh, more socialist way of living. And I'm not even trying to. I consider myself a socialist, but that's mostly because it's a label that kind of helps articulate my worldview and the way that I have chosen to live my life. I look at socialism as a way of life, not as an economic principle, not as a political philosophy, and it has led me to see changes in myself, and has led me to improve my physical and mental health while still trying to help out people in my community, while still trying to educate as many people as I possibly can. Um, you know, so it's just a label that I can articulate what my views are without going into an hour-long sermon of 33 years of developing a belief system, right? But I think that view is what we need in this world. And when you kind of learn about the details of neoliberalism, how it came about, and really what its goals are, versus something like China, where they are enacting socialist construction. And I want to make this point because whenever we start talking about things like China or Cuba or any of these other more socialist-leaning countries, less capitalistic-leaning countries, that is, the immediate kind of counter to that is, oh, well, they're not. Well, they're look at all the problems that they have. Look at all the problems that they have, right? And what that does is it denies the progress that they've made. It denies the change that they're trying to enact, and it doesn't allow the change to actually stick, right? We refuse to see it from a progressive lens, that a country is willing to change and move forward, and is backing those things up with action, with legislation, with policy, with changing the way that we look at government and the government is operating. And I think, when someone makes that kind of an argument, they're also ignoring their own country's faults. It's a very hypocritical, hyper-nationalistic way of looking at things. And it's very close-minded as well. It's very, very close-minded. If you're looking at it from an intellectual viewpoint, it doesn't do us any good. It doesn't move the conversation forward or any such thing. It only makes things a lot worse. So I don't buy into that argument for those reasons. But, when you look at China regulating billionaires and providing even some of their more rural communities with healthcare and education and better infrastructure than we have in the United States and even in some parts of Europe, it really, really starts making you ask the question of, well, should we start changing the system we're in? And that's kind of what we're discussing in this podcast. And Vijay does a really, really amazing job of really, concepts like neoliberalism and any sort of other economic concepts, they exist in the stratosphere. And Vijay is one of those people that does a really great job of bringing those issues down to earth and explaining them in a way that everybody can understand them, so that it's not this convoluted secret, that when certain people discuss things like neoliberalism or Wall Street or the way that the stock market works and so on and so forth, it's not, well, you don't understand because you haven't studied it. It's here's how you can understand it. And I think that to me says that to me has integrity, authenticity, and honesty behind it. And again, it makes me trust journalists like Vijay Prashad a lot more because they're not trying to hide something, they're not trying to covet something. They are trying to share the information and enlighten people and push society to make positive, progressive changes. So, with all of that said and done, I know I kind of went on a rambly, ranty thing there at the top of the show, which is something I'm trying not to do so much, but it's hard. I want to get into this really, really fucking amazing conversation with journalists from the Tricontinental Institute, Mr. Vijay Prashad. Enjoy. The first thing I kind of wanted to talk to you about, because you've written a lot about this particular topic, is the notion of neoliberalism, which is this economic platform that we've had to deal with for 40 years roughly. What really caused neoliberalism to take off and become the dominant financial force that's kind of taking over the globe? It's you're seeing it pop up everywhere, even in countries like India, where you would think that there would be a larger, on the ground grassroots movement. What kind of caused that spread to go global?
Look, it's great to be chatting with you. And I want to say first that when you talk about neoliberalism, the tendency is to think, oh my God, this is a really serious economic theory and it must have like a ton of, legitimacy behind it and so on. Actually, the historical entry of neoliberalism into our lives is much more prosaic. It's much more dirty, than, oh my God, this is some, Nobel Prize winner in economics and so on. No, it's not that. What happened was that about 5 or 6 decades ago, the very rich decided that, look, hey, listen, we are rich, we have a lot of extra money. We're not going to tolerate high taxes anymore. We're not going to tolerate too much government regulation of our personal lives and of our business activity, commercial activity. So what we're going to do is we're going to finance political, institutions, political parties, and so on. And we're going to make sure that there's an enormous new agenda that puts the idea that tax cuts are needed. Now, when we talk about tax cuts, ordinary people think, oh, wow, I'm getting a tax cut. No, your tax cut is nothing. They got a tax holiday. And what you saw then is they sort of saturation bombed society with this idea that tax cuts are good, the state should be small, and so on. And that attack by the very rich, in a sense, that attack which allowed them to move money to tax havens, to move money to offshore financial instruments, and so on, that basically starved society of the necessary tax dollars that a humane kind of capitalism might be might have enabled. And because societies were starved of cash, because governments were starved of cash, they couldn't provide social goods like public health systems, and so
Right.
they began to cut. That's what we call austerity. When they began to cut public health systems and a pandemic shows up, guess what? I mean, you just don't have the capacity to deal with a pandemic. Private hospitals and private medicine are not like public health. You don't have public health workers going door to door in a country like the United States or the United Kingdom. You know, how many residents of the US and the UK have seen even one government public health or any health worker knock on their door, test them, take their temperature? Nothing. It just is not happening. Country
Right.
like China or country like Cuba, where there's a commitment to public health, in Cuba, tens of thousands of students got trained in the beginning of the pandemic, and they literally went door to door to every one of the 11 million Cubans, to their homes, tested people, took down information, who's got disabilities, who's got comorbidities. They built an enormous apparatus of knowledge. and they were able to minimize COVID infections. Look at the UK, look at the United States, more people dead from COVID than in World War II. I mean, that's a consequence of this neoliberal attack on society by the very rich.
Well, and then now you have people in the States hoarding tests, so even if you can go buy tests, it's not even available. That was, that was the situation for me recently. Is I was lucky over the holidays that I was able to find 2 home tests to take, but they're not available around here. Like it's just gone. People are hoarding them and then selling them for, 30, $40 more than what CVS would charge. That to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of feels like neoliberalism on the ground floor. That this phenomenon has kind of encouraged people to do this sort of stuff, is hoard things and then sell it for a higher price. Would that be kind of an accurate statement to make?
Well, look, if the very rich say, I'm not going to pay taxes, I'm taking my money now, it accumulated, it's roughly $37 trillion. I'm going to put all this in a tax haven. We're not going to bother with the concept of society. In fact, we'll disparage the concept of society. If this is the kind of ideas percolating into educational institutions, into young people's minds,
Right.
be out an entrepreneur, make money, make money. Greed is good, as the great Gordon Gekko, the philosopher, says in Oliver Stone's attempted takedown of Wall Street. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
people took the Gordon Gekko character and made him into like a living saint when that was supposed to be a takedown. Greed is good. You were supposed to be revulsed by that. No, people said, wow, that's so cool. Greed is good. Greed is horrible. But that idea percolates down, and you're like, oh, wow, look, I can make money. I'm going to go buy all the toilet paper in the grocery store. I'm going to set up a little stand and sell it right outside, or the test, or things that people need out of desperation. So rather than create the feeling of community in these advanced capitalist countries, you've just created a dog eat dog mentality. Now, dog eat dog, actually, dogs don't eat dogs, Chris. That's the main thing to keep in mind. It's people cannibalizing each other's dreams. That's what neoliberalism has done. It's a form of cannibalization of the imagination, and that's just horrible. I mean, to hoard tests, what?
So it's so crazy. Like it's so crazy to me we even at the beginning of this pandemic, people were saying, oh, it might be 4 to 6 weeks that we'll have to be in lockdown, and people are going out and clearing toilet paper and milk off the shelves. It's like it's 4 to 6 weeks. I think you can make do with like a 12 pack. Like how often are you planning to go to the bathroom in these 4 to
I
6
mean,
weeks?
in that sense, thank God I'm Asian. Okay, I didn't even need the toilet paper, so I'm just doing fine, and I'm not saying anything, out of turn. That's 1.4 billion people in at least South Asia. Make it 2 billion people, perhaps, maybe more, that are actually quite
Right.
ecological about these matters. If we want to talk about climate change, what's wrong with you people in the West? Take a bloody note from people in South Asia and stop using toilet paper. And what's the deal with, forget toilet paper, what's the deal with that white sort of paper that hangs in kitchens? People keep
Oh, the
carrying
paper
this sort
towels?
of paper towel. What
Yeah.
the hell is that? Just use a towel, recycle, wash it again. I don't, half the time I don't understand what people are up to, frankly. You built a civilization. None of this makes sense to me. Refrigerators don't make sense to me. You're in a Chicago, or in, I don't know where, in some freezing place in Finland, and you have a refrigerator inside your house, a freezer, actually, even more dumb. Just keep an ice box outside. Why not do that? But no, we've got used
Right.
to convenience.
Yeah.
One of the things that neoliberalism also puts forward is this idea of convenient. What's convenient is good, what's inconvenient is bad. But convenient for whom? How many people can live like that? How
Right.
many people can live with freezers and refrigerators and a second fridge, and I don't know, God knows what all people have. But convenience is the death of the planet, and that's the other side of neoliberalism.
Yeah, and it's interesting because now there's a charge for convenience, right? That's what they sell you, but now they're making you pay for that convenience. And you can see it in concert tickets. That's what I deal with as a comedian. Is if I'm going to a ticketing company, I don't want them to put on a convenience fee for people that are coming to see me perform, because what's the point? I mean, isn't convenience supposed to benefit people without some sort of financial gain? Isn't that the point of convenience? But it just seems like neoliberalism takes these concepts and these ideas and turns them into a product. Just, I mean, even look at the way advertising is done in the United States, right? Is like Colin Kaepernick was an icon for a while, a social justice icon, and then he gets taken over by Nike, who takes his story to sell shoes. So it just seems like neoliberalism runs out of things to sell, so they go to these abstract concepts and products, and then they try to sell you your own identity in the form of shoes or jackets or whatever it is.
Yeah, and then small things that are meaningful in your life. The commute, for instance. You commute to work. Firstly, it's barbaric that everybody has to be in the individual car, and there's just in many countries around the world. It's not just in the United States. Is like, I would say, one of the scoff laws of public transport, but it's not the only place. And what I remember experiencing in San Diego was the creation of private lanes on the public freeway where you could pay a special toll to just bypass all the cars. This is not a lane for those who are carpooling. This is not a normal toll barrier. This is a special private toll road on the public road. I mean, the airlines who privatize the private, and then they ask you to pay a fee to get an aisle seat. You know, I mean, I just bought a ticket, and then you have a seat map that I can go to. And then when I try to book an aisle seat, you say, no, now you have to pay $25 extra. What? I mean, it's and by the way, this is airlines, right, who
Right.
don't start paying the air personnel, the stewards and the pilots. They don't start getting paid until the door is closed of the plane, and the brake is off. That's when
Yeah.
the air hostess starts to get her salary or his salary. It's when they're saying hello, get welcome on the flight, they're not being paid. The airline is making you pay a premium to get an aisle seat, but they are too cheap to pay their employees who are working. When they
Right.
say, welcome on board, let me help you put your bag up there, they're not getting paid. That's their donation. That's neoliberalism. It's the screwing of the worker at the same time as they squeeze from you the most money for the thing that you've already bought. I already bought a damn seat. Now you're telling me if you want that seat, you have to pay extra. Meanwhile, this person who's putting somebody's bag into the thing is not getting paid. That's actually the aircraft is a great way to understand neoliberal. It's a great screw. You're getting
Yeah.
screwed one way or the other.
So I mean, so if they're doing this sort of stuff, why, you hear these billionaires, they keep talking about, well, I'm operating my company at a loss. Like the ProPublica just did a great expose on like how billionaires really evade taxes. The one thing that as I read these articles, I questioned was, well, why are we buying into this if they're claiming that they're operating at a company at a loss? Like the LA Clippers lost $700 million, because they're looking at the whole cost of owning a team for 20, 30 years. So they're operating this company at a loss. So why is there this kind of culture that surrounds fetishizing billionaires as these highly successful people? But whenever it comes to taxation, they come down and say, well, I'm operating my business at a loss, I'm actually not making any money. It just doesn't add up.
Well, I mean, it's actually pretty simple. What they do is, and this is the crookedness of it. What they'll do is I'm a big billionaire. I'm going to buy, Mohan Enterprises. This is a company you came up with some brilliant idea, and I'm going to buy your company. I have, you know, $600 million sitting in a bank somewhere. You're selling the company at 20 million. I'm not going to, 20 million is nothing for my 600. I
Right.
can just write a check in cash, and buy it. No, I go to a bank. I borrow money from the bank, not only to buy your thing at valuation 20 million, but I might take some debt on. I might take 10 million in debt in order to have money to say start advertising for your product. So it's a 20 million company, already an inflated price because you wanted to sell it at an inflated price. So you can walk away and buy an island in the Caribbean and a private plane and do whatever the hell you want there, right? Well, you're all set. You sold for 20 million. I went to a bank, borrowed 30 million to buy your already overinflated company. The numbers don't make sense, because I have to pay the bank debt. I'm going to run it at a loss, quote unquote. But it's a good value company. I'm making some money. I have not risked a damn dollar in that because my 600 million is still sitting in some offshore account somewhere, money making money. But I'm entering into business using often either commercial bank money or private or public money. I get some government loan to buy this company, saying, it's a big thing. We're going to arms manufacturing, get tons of public money. If I bought an arms manufacturer, and it's run at a loss. But the reason it's run at a loss is because you inflated the asking price and then zipped off to the Cayman Islands or wherever, Aruba. And
Right.
I took extra debt, larded debt onto that company. And thirdly, I'm paying myself a big salary off the company's books and, vice presidents and so on. Obviously, it's running at a loss. These people don't care about running companies at a profit, making things lean. That's the reason they're getting their asses kicked by the Chinese and others. And because
Yeah.
they don't like getting their asses kicked by the Chinese, they would like to use the US military to go and bomb the hell out of China so that they can remain the masters of the universe. You want to know what's going on with the US and China?
I
That's
would love
what's
to.
going on. You've got
Yeah.
a capitalist class that is basically lazy, that has not been functioning as a entrepreneur class as such, which is borrowing public money, which is larding their companies with way too much debt, which is taking out too much in profit and not reinvesting it in their own firms. These are not bloody pioneers of every anything. These are the characters from Wally, lying in a lilo, sucking on a little drink, haven't got off their lilo in years, have robots doing everything. That's what these people are like, and it's interesting. There are two or three of them that are pretty energetic, including somebody I really dislike, Elon Musk. Pretty energetic people. But the bulk of them, it's as I described it. They don't risk their own money. They lard their companies with debt, and then they take way too much out as profit and don't put enough in as investment. And that's why they are really finding it difficult to compete on the world stage. They would like to talk about free enterprise. Actually, they are basically pigs eating off the trough.
Oh, but Vijay, I mean, we're told that they work so hard to get their billions. Anybody can be a billionaire if you just work really hard. That's the
Anybody,
narrative.
that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
Anybody.
You know,
Yeah.
that's the constant narrative that's told to everybody under capitalism and neoliberalism. Like this false this false dream that we're all chasing. You brought up China, and that this is I think this is kind of brilliant. Is they started going after their billionaires and having them put money back into their common prosperity program to help working class Chinese people. What what was kind of the way they went about doing something like that? And do you think that that model can be applied to a country like the United States, or even an up and coming capitalist democracy like India?
No, it cannot be. And
Okay.
here's the reason why. China was in the middle of a war that it's a 100-year war. It starts in the early 1800s when the British come in there and impose opium on the Chinese. They take the tea, they take as much wealth out there. They really, they fought two wars, the two opium wars, seized Hong Kong, seized parts of concessions in Shanghai, and so on. Portuguese already had colonies in Macau, humiliated the Chinese. 100 years, by the way, it goes all the way till the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949.
Right.
In 1949, when the communists come to power, they pledged themselves. They say now China is standing up. That's what Mao Zedong's line was. Chinese are standing up now. Well, that means they'd been bent in humiliation for a century. They're standing up, but it was an incredibly poor country. A couple of commitments they made which are important to bear in mind. One was that the well-being of people must be taken care of.
Mm.
So there were lots of problems in the first 25 years in China. I mean, the Great Leap Forward, the idea that anybody can create industry in their backyard, that really was a flop of an idea. The Cultural Revolution was a very serious error, in my opinion. Hurt a lot of people's lives. It was just not something that was at all good in retrospect. On the other hand, they improved people's living conditions. So by the 1970s, people in China were eating better. There was more education. There was less health problems. Compare India and China, Chris. It's incredible. India in the 1970s was disaster in these metrics compared to China. It's at that point that they pivoted and did a reform in 78. They allowed foreign capital to come in. They tried to breed this class of capitalists, to build the productive forces in China and so on. There was a lot of success in that. They also brought in science and technology, which allowed them to leapfrog over the West. But the core commitment to social justice remained in the Chinese Communist Party and in China in general. There's been a major debate over the course of the last 30 years about whether this get rich kind of schemes is something that's good for the country or not. When Xi Jinping came to power in 2013, the debate turned to the fact that, look, it's gone too far. These Chinese billionaires are way too powerful. They are leeching the society and so on. So it was a fight, let's say, within the context of a country which has a commitment to socialism. Now, it's not that everything is perfect in China, a huge amount of problems,
Right.
but this government is trying to rein in the billionaires, put them in their place, talk about common prosperity, whatever. The United States, India, and so on, privileging is not socialism, it's private property. So when private property is a religion, it's very difficult to rein in anybody. You can't see the Indian government, which is hand in glove with the Adanis and the Ambanis. These are the big
Yeah.
billionaires. You can't see the Indian government go to Mukesh Ambani and say, sorry, pal, we're going to expropriate things from you. No, the primary commitment is to Mr. Gautam Adani or to Mukesh Ambani and so on. It's not to your ordinary farmer. That's why the farmers were on, massive protest. It's not there. So when a country's commitment is not to the broad mass of the people, it's hard to do these things. In China, it's true. In the last 25, 30 years, there was way too much power in the coastal cities and way too much power around a handful of companies and their executives. But because there's a kind of inherent commitment to social justice through the revolution, the government of Xi Jinping was able to pull in the other direction, with some, okay, let's just be clear, with a lot of internal dissent. I mean, people were like, we don't want this. We don't mind having, Jack Ma be this big tycoon walking like, the colossus astride the Asian continent and so on. There were people who said that. There are 90 million members in the Communist Party of China. Okay, 90 million members. That's a third of, roughly a third, quarter to a third of the population of the United States. 90 million members. You can imagine the different opinions they have. So for somebody like Xi Jinping, he represents a kind of left of center view. He went there. You can't expect Biden. Biden can't even pass an infrastructure bill. What are you talking about constraining the billionaires? Forget it.
Well, every time I look at that sort of information of them saying like, oh, we tax the billionaires, we put a cap on them. At the end of the day, they even when they put into the common prosperity program, they're still billionaires. Like to me, whenever I look at that and people say, "Oh, if you get, if we execute socialism in America, nobody will be rich, everybody will be, poor and destitute." And then you look at a country like China, which does have a commitment to socialism and is going in that direction, still has billionaires even after they rein in their billionaires. So it's almost, it objectively proves these people wrong. that try to write these hit pieces about socialism by basically saying you're not going to be rich in socialism. you
Well,
know
my general view is that people will. You're exactly right. People will say, "Oh my God, you want to abolish first class," and everybody has to be in second class. My view is the opposite. I want to abolish second class. I want everybody to be in first class, dude. I
Yeah.
want everybody to have top quality services. That's the point of socialism. It's not to have
Right, right.
crappy services. That's not our dream. We want good services. I mean, if you've been to a country like China, or you've been to some of these countries, like, public transport is excellent. It's really good. Like, I would like to see New York City, a city I really love. I would like to see the New York City subway network get a huge amount of investment, so that the trains are better and they are swifter, and they're not like, just not, you don't feel happy in the New York City subway trains, especially trains that go to the more non-white boroughs.
Right.
Like, if you're riding the train up Manhattan, those lines, the trains are older, they are in less good shape, they come less often. The trains that go to working class areas really badly produced.
Yeah.
It's the same in LA, in Los Angeles. The train system, feeds the suburbs. The bus system is in bad shape until the bus riders union showed up and led these protests and brought natural gas buses, and it was working class people who fought to change that. Well, let's have good services for everybody, not just.
Right.
So I say, abolish second class, let's only have first class, fine by me. And when you said, they take money from billionaires and they're still billionaires, because these people are sitting on way too much cash. And that cash needs to be made productive. You see, I'm at this stage in history. We are at a stage where it's not, let's be a little bit clear, it's not going to be easy to expropriate everybody. Okay, it's not
Right.
going to happen like that. But let's demand that the rich put their money into productive uses and
Mhm.
not into financial instruments. Part of this tendency of neoliberalism is this very odd kind of iceberg, where rather than the tip of the iceberg above the water, the bulk of the iceberg is sitting above the water. The productive base is very shallow. A lot of the money is being transacted through financial instruments, through various kinds of derivatives, buying things that don't even exist, pieces of paper and so on. And the rate of return on investment can be quite high for billionaires. Also, some of them are perfectly content just keeping their money in cash. They're not even investing in anything productive or in stock markets, they're just holding cash. That is just unseemly. You've made money from my labor, now reinvest to make my society and civilization interesting. I don't even mean like give me a cash handout. Invest in culture, invest in arts, have like music in the park. And I don't mean by donations, I mean produce academies of music and things that the old plutocrats did 100 years ago, the old Carnegies and all that. That's a start, man.
Yeah.
It's not totalism, but it's a lot better than this shit where these people buy islands in the Caribbean, they disappear there, they have their own culture, they bring their own musicians to perform for 25 people, and there is no attempt to produce things in the world. They sort of throw slop at us and then they create their own. This is the just the decades before the French Revolution is how they live. They're at an island called Versailles. And let me tell you, if we go and check, and I haven't checked, I bet you that there's some island in the Caribbean owned by some plutocrat whose name is actually Versailles.
Writing private concerts for them and a couple of their friends. That's their Saturday night.
And the aircraft will be called something like horse and buggy. I mean, you know, I remember watching that film with Nicole Kidman and that fellow who's a Scientologist from
Oh,
Top
Tom
Gun,
Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Where they had this ball with the masks and the weird. There was a pretty weird film. But that fantasy of the ancient regime, the fantasy of monarchies and things, it's there, man. I mean, we got a taste of it when the Jeffrey Epstein story broke.
Yeah.
the kinds of ways in which people live. Yes, at the base of it is terrible sexual violence against young women and so on, and girls, terrible sexual violence. But then also it's the Prince of England, and it's musicians, and it's lawyers like Alan Dershowitz, and it's former presidents, and they fly off to these private islands, and they essentially there's that just makes my head want to explode.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed. Yeah, these are our role models, is what they keep calling them. Yeah, it's absurd because I just saw this headline and I had to roll my eyes at it, that they're considering building a hotel in space. And like, I'm looking outside my window and I'm like, well, my road needs to be fixed though. We don't need a hotel in space. We need a road here. Like, it just seems like, every time you look at neoliberalism and the people that champion these sort of economic models, they're always looking to build these distractions, but not really take care of the core problem. And then it becomes that distraction is a key part of maintaining neoliberalism across the globe, using propaganda. And that, which is where the media comes into play, which is why people like you are so important, because you can't trust Anderson Cooper to tell you the truth. So it all of these kind of things funnel right back into keeping neoliberalism going. And I think that's part of the reason why I was so excited when the farmer strike started, which started, I think, on Thanksgiving Day, in 2020, was when it started, and nobody covered it. It was like the People's Dispatch, Left Voice, and then like three comedians were talking about it, myself included, which is just, to me, embarrassing to large media companies like The Guardian, like CNN, like even Times of India. It's embarrassing when you don't cover a 250 million person strike, right? Like, and we saw the impacts of that. And just for folks that might not know about the Indian farmer strike, would you be able to kind of talk about what happened and how it ended, because it ended kind of great.
Firstly, look, you're right. I mean, we should be embarrassed for these media houses. We shouldn't be cynical about it. It is actually grotesque that every year for the last 20 years, hundreds of millions of Indian workers have gone on strike, an annual general strike, and not one of these periodicals covers it. I mean, it's shocking. It's like you can't get cynical about this. It's shocking that they don't. So, in 1991, India so called liberalized the economy, opened up the economy, and part of that opening up was through the International Monetary Fund and the US Treasury Department, a lot of pressure to end subsidies in agriculture and to bring commercial activity more into rural areas. And I think this idea of ending subsidies in agriculture is at the core of this, because what you saw was from 1991 till about 5 or 6 years ago, you saw about 300,000 Indian farmers commit suicide. And many of them were committing suicide by drinking pesticide, by drinking fertilizer, and so on. And it's actually telling that they were doing this, because what happened was the moment the government started to cut the subsidy regime for agriculture, agriculture cannot be done without subsidies. It's a very complicated business. If you just allow water prices to go up and electricity prices, and you don't regulate fertilizer prices, and you don't regulate this production of pesticides and so on, if you don't provide assistance, farmers cannot grow and then make a living. Hunger among farmers globally is at a very high level, globally very high level. So what happens is that farmers found that the buying price of seeds was high. They had to start buying seeds, pesticides, fertilizer. These input prices were so high. Then the electricity prices had got high in some places. Because of all that, they just couldn't make a living. They were going deeper and deeper into debt. This was there in the United States in the 1980s. I covered some of those cases in Iowa, where
Yeah.
there were also farmer suicides. And those places, small farmers sold, Willie Nelson created a thing called farm aid to try to raise
Yeah.
money for debt. And lots of farmers went into meth farming. They had meth labs on their farms to try to get some income and so on. Very tragic situation in the United States. So this predates what happened in India, but it's the same process, not so far away. I
Right.
wrote an article called Iowa is not so far away from Telangana. This was in the year 2000, just when within 10 years of Indian liberalization. Anyway, in India, this farmer attack on farming was very severe. Like, as I said, 300,000 farmers, at least that we know of, committed suicide. This is my colleague P. Sainath. He put the number together. Okay, so since the Modi government came in, this is the right wing government of Narendra Modi came in 2013 and 14. Since the government came in and has been governing since then, there have been a series of rolling farmer protests in Maharashtra, in Rajasthan. These are states in western and northern India. Um, when we saw these protests take place, and they were quite considerable, farm suicide numbers dropped. That means farmers, it seems, were given some hope by the fact of struggle. The Maharashtra long march from Nasik to Mumbai is a very
Oof.
important march that took place a few years ago, lifted the spirits of farmers. Then, in the middle of all this, the middle of the pandemic, without any debate, the Modi government rammed through the three bills into law. Now, if people know what Uberization is,
Mm.
where you're an Uber driver and essentially you are captive to the app. Whatever the app tells you, you have to do, and you don't know who the other Uber drivers are, so you can never organize a union or anything. And it's the app, this voice from the sky, that's essentially determining your destiny. App says, sorry, no, you're a badly behaved driver, we're cutting you off if you get bad reviews and so on. So all the customers, whatever you say, it's an appalling. Uber driving is actually not unusual. Most working class activities around the world is being Uberized.
Right.
Call center workers Uberized, Amazon delivery Uberized, grocery store workers Uberized.
Right.
More and more places we are seeing Uberization. Well, these bills, these laws sought to Uberize Indian farmers, and they knew it. And they immediately said, look, we don't want to become essentially the slaves of these men whose names I mentioned earlier, Adani and Ambani, who had already begun to buy silos because they would capture the marketplace. They were privatizing the marketplace
Oh,
for
wow.
goods. So that's how the Uberization would work: is they would be apps to set prices and things like that. Well, farmers didn't want anything. So 250 million workers went on strike, as you said, 26 November 2020. This was the opening of the farmers' struggle because Delhi is in North India. Mainly farmers from Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan to some extent, and some came from Maharashtra to gather at the borders of Delhi. And they stayed there for almost a year. Actually, they stayed there for over a year. Now, the Modi government did everything, attacked them physically, attacked them ideologically, said to them that you are anti national, that you're Khalistanis, referring to a sectarian movement or secessionist movement from the 1980s, attacked them. Now, the thing is, you got to remember that the British had started bringing in people from Punjab and Haryana into the military in large numbers. That continued in independent India. So when the government said, oh, you farmers are, you are anti-national, well, their children showed up at these protest sites in their military uniforms saying, anti-national, that's my dad you're talking about. Anti-national, that's my mom you're talking about. Be careful what you say. They threw their medals into fire and so on.
Oh,
This
wow.
really scared the government, man. I mean, the government was like, wow, if this attitude enters into the military, into the police force and so on, we have a revolutionary situation. So Modi, in his period in government as the prime minister, has only twice backed down.
Mm.
When not only popular protests but protests from the opposition, never accepted it. Only twice he's backed down. Once before was also because of a farmer protest, and this time Modi, the week before the 1 year anniversary, came on TV and said, okay, we are going to take the bill back. But he didn't say we are not going to push this agenda. He said because we actually introduced it in a bad way. Very clever. You got to follow his language. So, and also this year, is coming up elections in Uttar Pradesh, the biggest state in India, 200 million people, and in Punjab. And if the farmers' protest had continued into the elections, the BJP would have suffered a lot. Anyway, it looks like the farmers' protest might bear some political dividends for the opposition. I'm not sure how much, but some. So that's it. And let me tell you something. I believe that this farmers' protest in India, hundreds of millions of farmers protesting and struggling, and entire communities participating, is the most important mass struggle that we have seen in this century so far.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of lessons that organizers in the states, in the UK, just anywhere in the West, there's a lot of lessons that they can take from the large amount of solidarity that was shown in India. And that was part of the reason why I wanted to. I kept talking about it, and and then it became really difficult to find stories because they were cutting internet access for people. And the other thing I found kind of surprising was a lot of the people that were part of the strike, the farmers that were part of the strikes, were older. These are not 20 somethings. These are people 50 plus. I thought that was incredible, and something to take note of. Because that's the other thing whenever it comes to talking about folks on the left or talking about people that champion socialism. These conservatives and these neoliberals always point out that it's young people, and the older generation doesn't want to do anything with socialism, and they don't want and to do anything with organization or the unions or anything like that. I find that to be quite significant that most of these farmers were older you
Well,
know
the first thing to pay attention to is that they were fighting an existential fight, that
hmm
their way of life was going to be destroyed by Uberization. So, I mean, it's not clear that they were fighting for a socialist future or
sure,
for,
right.
a left future or anything. Theirs was a mass struggle. They just said, we refuse to be Uberized. Now, the consequence of that is, listen, Praji, listen to me. If you don't want to be Uberized, you're going to have to advance to socialism. There's no option, okay? But that was not where people were
Right.
necessarily. There were lots of people who were with red flags and with the All India Kisan Sabha, the Communist Union, and so on. They were there. But there were also people with, Mr. Tiket, people with the yellow flags and so on, who had a farmerist consciousness. They wanted to protect their way of life. Well, of course we stand with them 100%, but also one would like to tell them, that there's no other option,
Yeah.
frankly. I mean, I can't think of another option. We've got to, like, and also because I fundamentally believe that in any society, you have to subsidize agriculture.
Mm.
You have to also subsidize agroecological agriculture, organic type of things. Why? Because it's not always profitable to do everything in life, pal. It's not. You're a comedian, okay? I believe that in a society, artists should be supported. You shouldn't have to go out there and hustle to make a living. I'll give an example. It's a silly example, but it may make the point. One day I was driving somewhere, and it was early in the morning. I was going to a meeting, and on the side of the road there was a clown who had a big sign which essentially said, "I'm an asshole." And he was twirling the sign around, dressed like a clown, twirling it around. And I looked at him and said, "What the hell? It's like 7:30 a.m. He must have started at 5, put on, but he was there for commuters or whatever. I don't know what he was doing. He was not advertising anything. Obviously, he had a sign, and it was not a gag. It was not with a radio station. He was just there. So I asked the person I was with, "What's this?" He said, "Oh, this is just a funny fellow. He's there once in a while, not every day." Okay. We were in this meeting, 6, 7 hour meeting. Sometime in the middle of the afternoon, I was ready to call it quits. And I just started laughing. People said, "What's happening?" I said, "I was thinking of that bloody clown." What clown? So I described it. Everybody laughed. It lifted our mood for the rest of the day. This
Yeah.
guy improved our productivity. If you even just think of it in that narrow capitalist sense, this guy he doesn't know who I am. I don't know who he is. We just passed, a ship in the morning, right? We just
Right.
passed,
Right.
and he made me happy. So why can't we have artists just make us happy in the world? Do paintings on the street. You're a comedian, just walk down the street and tell jokes, man. I don't know what kind of bits you do as such, but I don't mean to demean your craft
No,
and all,
no,
that
not at
you
all.
need to be in a proscenium stage or whatever, but just support artists, support farmers, support by what? Support by a collective labor, support by a collective social wealth. We let's decide to put our social wealth to use, not to keep it in, illicit tax havens, and to have somebody have like champagne in their swimming pool, and I don't know what all they have. uh, you know uh, Donald Trump used to eat hamburgers on solid gold plate. Yeah, a solid gold plate. He would have McDonald's. And the thing about the Donald Trump is, at least that's what one read in a biography of him. Thing about Trump is he didn't, because he kept trying to lose weight. He wouldn't eat both buns, but he would eat two Big Macs.
The
So
buns are
I
the
don't know
problem,
anything
Vijay.
about any of these things. Just that he ate that on a solid gold plate. What the hell is that? Instead, I would like that solid gold plate to be used to pay that guy with the sign for his annual salary. I mean, that
Yeah,
solid gold
yeah.
plate is way more than that guy would want, even, and I don't even mean, what's just, but he may say, look, I'll take that plate, but that's 3 years.
Right. Yeah, this is covering me for 3 years. I'm good. Yeah, I don't I that's the thing with every time like the space race we saw last year, it's just these things are like, are you bored? Because I got some stuff you can work on. It's these people have these phrases like greed is good, and oh, if you this is another one of my favorites that I used to hear all the time. If you got time to lean, you got time to clean, and it's just busy work, right? It's work that doesn't really mean anything, but at the same time, if you want something to do, there's stuff to fix, like we need more hospital beds. I would love if the gazebo down the street from my house was fixed up a little bit so that people can hang out there at night, maybe put a heater there for the winter or something. These are things that these billionaires can do, but they're so out of touch and so bored. They're like, what if I go to space and try to live on the moon? Like
I wish. I wish. I wish. That's the thing. I mean, Space Hotel, you started this by
yeah, yeah,
talking about the Space Hotel. It's not even clear, like, what are you hoteling from? You know, like, I mean, generally when people go to a hotel, it's either that they are at work somewhere, they've got, at a different place, or they've gone
yeah.
to see a city, tourists and so on, or their building caught on fire because the landlord didn't take care of the electricals, and there are various tangible reasons why people go to a hotel. Now you're sending me up into space in a spacecraft, which is essentially a floating hotel, to disembark from a floating hotel onto another
Nothing.
spacecraft, which is a floating hotel. I just, who comes up with these thoughts? Like, why don't you just keep me in the first spacecraft, change the sign from spacecraft to hotel, so that you don't have to build something that sits up there and orbits the Earth as a hotel? I understand the space station. The space station is different than a spacecraft. The space station was created up there to do scientific experiments to help us better understand the universe, better understand various compounds, medicines, and so on. They've done some pretty interesting scientific work up there. It's a big difference between the space station, which is a scientific outpost, just like many scientific outposts on the planet, and the space hotel, which I just really literally don't get. There I watched a video, a YouTube video of Qatar Airlines Uber first class,
Oh
where there's
man.
essentially a hotel room on the plane. And
Ugh.
I watched that and I thought, it's hugely expensive to get, but I thought I would never want the plane to land. I just want to keep flying 2 or 3 times around the earth so I could just enjoy this room. So luxurious. Okay, weird thing about that room. So every room has its own butler on the plane. Okay,
Oh my
every
goodness.
room has its own, or maybe there's one butler for three. I didn't follow it that closely, but there's a butler. And yet in every amazing looking room, there's a tiny refrigerator. And I thought, who's bringing groceries onto the plane? Like, I'm coming onto this like Uber first class with my own butler, and yet I'm gonna have a refrigerator. Like, I fixated on that. I couldn't see the rest of the little
Yeah.
promo video. I was just fixated thinking, who brings a refrigerator on, and anyway, the point is you're there, so like I don't understand how money
Yeah.
works. Like
Yeah.
this is like an 8 hour flight, and you're willing to pay 30-40 thousand dollars for a ticket
Oof.
for that 8 hour flight. I mean, I know some people own aircrafts and it's way more expensive, or they even charter planes, way more expensive than $30,000 per flight. But your family of four, you know, that's 120, put taxes in, 150 maybe with the limo ride to the airport, whatever, 150K just to take an 8 hour flight. Wow, man, that's
Must be nice, but right, like, to have so much money that you're just that's what you're doing with.
and that's the people we intersect with. We don't intersect with the private planers and the charter planers. These
Right,
are just people we intersect with. These
right,
are the 150K for the flight. Like they'll die with us when the flight crashes. The
right.
private plane people will be just flying right by saying, see ya, you
Take it
know.
easy,
Yeah.
right.
So these are the people we just intersect with, and yet we see how grotesque it is.
Yeah, I have 2 more questions for you. The first one, you brought this idea that, the farmers didn't go into the strike thinking, "Well, I'm gonna push back against this government using a socialist tactic. It was more about livelihood. But like you mentioned, if they want to keep continuing to push back against this neoliberal government, then you're going to have to lean more socialist, right? Is that the reason why socialism is demonized and condemned on a global scale by these people? Because these even these more conservative folks, these more traditionally conservative folks, once they realize what capitalism is actually doing to them, there doesn't seem any other option but to go towards socialism to kind of fix what capitalism is broken.
Well, look, as we speak, a venerable liberal magazine in the United States has totally smeared me and called me essentially a denier of genocide in China, and also suggested by implication that I
Which
believe that the killing of Native Americans and Native Australians and so on is legitimate. It's a total smear article. It just smelled to me like some kind of CIA dossier, if I'm
yeah,
frank with you. It's a mainstream liberal magazine, okay? And the journalist, when I wrote him and said, hey, listen, what's going on here? This is weird. He was like, well, I have the transcript and the fact checkers checked it. And I mean, I just thought it was extraordinary because I don't want to get too much into it, but I'm just saying that in order to say that look, I am not carrying any buckets for the country of China. There's 1.4 billion people. Okay, they can handle whatever they take themselves. They don't need people like me talking for them or not for them or whatever. But the fact is that in the last 2 years, the Chinese have not only controlled COVID at a rate that is incredible. Just a few thousand people dead. And I don't even know what the exact number is, but it's nothing compared to the US, which is going to be perhaps a million people. It's 800,000 dead,
yeah,
more than in the in World War II. Um, so one is they were able to control COVID, and secondly, they abolished absolute poverty. 800 million people lifted out of poverty. These are extraordinary feats, but these are threats. These things themselves threaten the self image of people in the West, of people
mm,
in Brazil, India. The ruling elites are threatened by all this. They don't want this to be there. They would perhaps prefer that all the focus is on their storyline regarding Xinjiang and genocide and this and that and so on. They don't want to focus on the fact that absolute poverty is eradicated or that COVID has been held down. Look, what's a human rights violation? I look closely at the World Health Organization Constitution from 1946. It says that it's a human right to attain the highest attainable standard of health. That's a direct quote. It's a human right. That's there in the International Declaration of Human Rights. That's there in the Alma Ata Declaration, 1978. That's there in the Economic and Social Commission Council's mandate in 2000. United States is a signatory to these things. That means the US government has violated the human rights of the US people. That's a genocidal, it's an incredible 800,000 people dead, and yet we don't hold these countries, in the contempt that they should be held, the ruling classes. Over a million Iraqis killed in the US war of aggression,
Hmm.
illegal war against Iraq. That somehow is acceptable, and focus of attention will be Xinjiang, or focus of attention will be Darfur. Horrible things may be happening in those places, but let's not take our eyes off the fact that the people who keep saying, look over there, are ignoring what they have done to Afghanistan, to Iraq, to Libya, to Syria. I mean, what, to Honduras?
All of a
Uh,
sudden, America cares about Muslims, right?
Isn't that hilarious? You're right now running an actual concentration camp in Guantanamo. Now, 20 years old, the week we are speaking, 20 years old. You're running an actual concentration camp, and you're accusing other people of having concentration camps, and US liberals marching alongside. I was struck in
Right.
this liberal magazine that the foreign affairs advisor to Bernie Sanders essentially calls for sanctions against China. I thought, seriously? You're Bernie Sanders foreign, policy guy. What's going on here? This is lazy thinking.
Yeah.
And so when you raise the question of the farmers and socialism, and are they afraid, I think they are very afraid. I mean, they are so afraid that they have to go after people like me, who are what? I mean, what am I? I'm a person who's been a journalist. I was a professor at a small college, and now I run a research institute. I'm still a journalist. I mean, yes, my newsletter gets read by a million people, but that's 1 million out of 7.9 billion in the
Right.
world. What am I? I'm a nothing. Yet you are so threatened by me that you have to go out there and call me a genocidaire. That's shameful.
To something they have no proof for, that people have debunked countless times over and over again, and nobody corroborated the guy that wrote the story. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. You can say that what's happening to the Uyghur population isn't great, and we would love that if China would treat them better, and we hope that Xi Jinping has a plan to fix this. But to claim that it's a genocide when it's not, when the US has such an atrocious health system, healthcare system, that 800 million people are dead, is just, it's laughable. It's laughable when things like this happen. And I'm really sorry to hear that I have friends that get smeared. Like Lee Camp got smeared 3 times within the span of, like, 18 months. And they're all absurd, and it always, I don't know if it makes me laugh or it makes me sad. It might be a little bit of both, but the people that believe these articles that they read, and they don't do anything to confirm whether, this guy is right or this guy is wrong. It's I could go on
My
and
friend, I am told, although I have not got access to the archives of this particular magazine, but I am told that this magazine supported the use of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and
well,
Nagasaki. It's a liberal magazine, venerable liberal magazine. And I am also told, again, I'm not able to confirm this, but I am told that it has not apologized for supporting the use of massive weapons against the people of Japan. And so, I mean, it to me is a mark of some curiosity that rather than spend
yeah.
time looking in the mirror, they would prefer to, throw their fecal matter, let's say, at people who are out there trying to understand the world and explain the world as best as they can. Nobody is saying you and I are clairvoyant. There's a lot of things we miss, a lot of mistakes we made. I mean, I've written things in the past that I regret because I thought I was saying something that is correct,
Right.
and then I realized on reflection it's not correct. I wrote a story years ago, in the middle of a confrontation in West Bengal, where I wrote things that I regret now. I thought they were correct at the time. I talked to various people, seemed that that was the nature of the facts. Turns out I was wrong on the facts, and I've said so many times, but yet it doesn't matter,
Hmm.
because they pretend that we think that we are clairvoyant. Not at all, and not, no Abrahamic standpoint. Don't stand on a mountain and see everything. We're seeing just little bits and pieces of reality. By the way, I have a great, my daughter is a comedian. I have a great respect for the profession because I understand comedians don't generally think they stand on the mountaintop. They observe things the way they see it. They show the ridiculousness of reality.
Yeah.
That's a form of critique, you know. I mean, I'm not talking about Seinfeld, which is comedy about nothing is really just nothing. You know, but if you're able to, you know, my daughter has told me for years, she said, you know, I'm you got to cultivate punching up, not
Yeah.
punching down.
Yes.
And you know, punching down is just absurd and easy, and it ends up you just reinforce racism and sexism and so on. But punching down is hard because, sorry, punching up is hard because it's hard to make people laugh. You know, it's too close to
Absolutely.
our lives.
That's pretty much. I mean, I talk about this sort of stuff. I like ideas and philosophy and history, so I incorporate that into my act with personal stories. But that is but that's that you're right. Punching up is really hard, and when you are trying to punch up, and when you are using comedy as a way to speak truth to power, or I don't think I go into specifically think I'm going to change people's minds. I'm just excited to talk about, this new thing I discovered, like the farmer strike, to say, like, hey, they beat a pretty big neoliberal neoconservative government. That's a big deal. That's exciting. And then to talk about it, and who is the victim of my joke? It's not going to be the farmers. It's going to be people like, Amit Shah, who's coming out and making outrageous claims that these are Sikh separatists, and conflating them with Muslims, which are two very different religions. That's the target of the joke because it's so absurd. And this guy has all the power. These farmers don't. These farmers are at the behest of his power, but they flipped it. They flipped the table, and I think that's pretty powerful.
I'm going to tell you a funny story about
Yeah,
this. In 1992, when there was really terrible uh, tension in India around the rise of the BJP, the party of
yeah,
Mr. Modi and Amit Shah and so on, I was at a birthday party of my granduncle, who was a man of the right. And at his birthday party was a leader of the BJP who was the mentor of some of these people, Modi and Amit Shah and so on. His name was Arun Jaitley. Later, he was the Home Minister of India. Mr. Jaitley, knew me, and so he asked me to step out with him onto the terrace where there was an open veranda. And I was there with him, and he said to me, "Listen, I've been reading the things you're writing." I was at the time writing in some Indian newspapers, and he said, "It's okay if you're critical of us. We can tolerate that." But he said, "If you make fun of us, be careful." And I found that really chilling, and I've thought about it a lot through my life. 20, I guess now, is that 20, 30 years later?
30 years. Yeah,
30 years later, I think about that a lot. I think about that a lot because I know the people in power, especially these kind of people, they can tolerate some amount of criticism, but they don't like to be made fun of. And when you punch up, especially as a comedian, as a writer, as somebody who is able to find a way to get under their skin, they are very dangerous people.
yeah.
And I'm afraid of them sometimes. I was afraid of Arun Jaitley after that comment. I'm afraid of Amit Shah. He's a scary man. I'm actually afraid of a lot of people in the U.S. government. I fear them because I think they are dangerous people. I was doing a story on the killing of an American ambassador in Kabul in
Mm.
1979. His name was Adolf Dubs, and I'd been going around the world collecting information. I was in England, talked to people in British intelligence, talked to former CIA agents, and so on. I got a call from a guy who was operations head in that region in the 1970s when Dubs was killed. And he asked me to meet him in Massachusetts. At the time, I was in, I think, Beirut. And I wrote him back and I said, "I'll be happy to meet you." I went to meet him, and at the coffee shop in a hotel in Cambridge, Mass. He's now dead. He was a very senior member of the CIA. He says to me at that meeting, he says, "I'll tell you lots of stories. I'll tell you things you don't even know to ask me about. But," he says, "I don't think you should look into the story of Dubs." He said, "Be careful. These are dangerous people." One man says to me, Don't make fun of us because we draw the line there. Be careful. Another one says, don't look at that story. Be careful. These are dangerous people. There's a
Yeah.
cost to be paid. It's not a game. The things that we are doing, what you are doing, it's not a game. We're up
Right.
against some very dangerous people. And I'm not saying this as some kind of crazy conspiracy theorist. I'm just telling you two actual stories. One man was became the home minister of India, the other was director of operations CIA in West Asia, also station chief in Paris, and so on. Very senior member of the CIA. Be careful.
Yeah. Yeah. It is they are scary people, especially when I mean I remember when I was in India a couple years ago, and met some comics and went to an open mic to perform, and there was a comic that talked about making fun of the BJP, not even a particular candidate, and somebody from the party was there and held high enough rank that he called the cops because he was making fun of the party, and he got thrown in jail overnight until he apologized the following day, and his dad had to come get him out of prison, and I hear those stories and then to me it's comical whenever comics complain, because I hear that story and then I hear comics in the United States complain and say, "Oh, I can't say this joke because now it's considered racist." It's like, "Oh, really? Go ahead and try to make fun of the BJP in India and see what happens." Like, you know, what you're, it's I don't mean to sound condescending, but to me it's like, "Oh, you can't tell your joke about black people that you used to tell in the '80s anymore because everybody figured out that it's racist now." That's great. Are you getting thrown in prison now? Cuz I don't think you are. This is like cotton candy problems compared to sort of stuff. But I think going up against that is important, because to me is we got to flip that script. They need to be more afraid of us than we are of them, and I think we're approaching that point, because we're seeing politicians and we're seeing leaders that are, even large companies like John Deere and Kellogg that are now going to have to listen to what the workers have to say and what they're demanding. So I see that as a huge positive, and I'm crossing my fingers to see more of that in 2022.
I mean, we can only wish and
Yeah.
hope.
Vijay, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. This was absolutely wonderful, and I'm a huge fan of your work. Where can people find out more about what you're working on and find all the writings that you do?
Well, they should go to thetricontinental.org. That's the institute I lead. I have a couple of books coming out this year that people might be interested in. One is a long conversation with Frank Barat called Struggle is What Makes Us Human. That'll come out from Haymarket. And then there's a book I wrote with Noam Chomsky called The Withdrawal, which will come out from the New Press. And that's a book about US withdrawal from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, and it's subtitled "The Fragilities of U.S. Power," and that'll be out from the New Press.
Wonderful. Well, I will be sure to keep an eye out for those books. Thank you so much for doing this. This is awesome.
Great, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Kablamo. Bam. There it is. That's our conversation with Vijay Prashad. Please do follow his work at thetricontinental.org. Sign up for that email list and keep an eye out for those books. Two really awesome books that I'm excited to read. That's right. Your boy's reading books. I'm excited to read these books. I am legitimately trying to improve the amount of reading I do for fun. It is a difficult challenge. I want to right now the thing I've written that I'm trying to implement is at least one day a week. One day a week where I get to just read, right? That's kind of the goal. Have I achieved this goal? Well, that's a great question, folks. I have not achieved this goal, but when awesome people put out books like that, it makes me excited and makes me want to get back into reading. So be sure to check out the tricontinental.org, and keep an eye out for Vijay Prashad's new book. And you can follow him on social media at Vijay Prashad. That's VIGAY PRASHAD. Um, you know what the other cool thing is, and this is like a little. I'm gonna get a little mushy and gushy, you guys. As someone that grew up as an Indian immigrant in America, I was born in India, moved to the States when I was 8. A lot of you probably know that about me already. You know, I didn't really have any role models growing up that looked like me. You know, the two comedians that I felt um, that I could really look up to, contemporary comedians. Obviously, there's a generation of comedians that I look up to and have influenced me. Um, you know, and even in terms of leadership, even in terms of journalism and film and acting and pop culture, I don't have a lot of role models that look at me. Right, the two comedians that I lined up with and they became my mentors and very close friends of mine were Lee Camp and Stuart Huff. And I'm again, it's like I'm not trying to shit on them or anything, but they don't have the same cultural background I do. They don't look like me, right? So and identity and representation is important. I'm not gonna say that it isn't, but I'm also not saying that you have to ham fist something about identity and representation and culture into every piece of media that's ever been produced out there. If it's done naturally and kind of just appears as the norm, then it'll be reflected that way, right? So I don't have a lot of Indian people in the American zeitgeist in any way, shape, or form, whether in the little lefty circles or not, that I can really look up to and say, wow, this is really cool that someone that comes from a similar cultural background and also looks like me is doing this thing that matches very closely to my belief system. And but Vijay Prashad is one of them, right? Vijay Prashad is an Indian journalist that is taking on capitalism and has been for decades now. That is really, really cool. Um, it's really, really cool to have. And getting the opportunity to talk to him and getting the opportunity, even after the podcast, we chatted a little bit, and kind of got to learn a little bit about each other's backgrounds, and you even heard some of the scary stuff that he's been through. But this is the type of person that I can be like, I'm so excited that someone that looks like me shares similar beliefs to me and is doing something for positive change. It makes me feel good. I don't have a lot of those in this career track I've taken, or in this world. I've talked about how important representation is before, and I don't want to go into it too much, but when it comes to pop culture, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and I think the reason why I really gravitated to something like Deep Space Nine, not just because what a great story and what a great challenge to the philosophies that were brought up in Star Trek, and in that show, we get kind of close with Bashir. He is still not Indian, but at least he's culturally brown, if that makes any sense. And that's kind of a big deal. Because up till that point, I didn't really have anything. I had a British guy that pretended to play an Indian guy in Short Circuit, which effectively ruined my life. We had Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, which effectively ruined my life. We had Haji from Johnny Quest, which effectively ruined my life. Are you guys getting it? Do you guys understand why having positive influences in pop culture and media and journalism and all these things is like important, and why I'm like, please Stop asking me to do the accent. I'm not a fucking Chuck Lorre character. Anyway, that's a long and short way of saying it's really fucking cool to have someone like Vijay Prashad um, doing the type of journalism he's doing, and amplifying, philosophies and stories and ideologies that he is kind of bringing up into the light, shedding more light on these issues. This is very cool. Um, uh, that's my gushy fanboy moment. That's my gushy fanboy moment. Again, to kind of reiterate from the top of the show, doing some virtual shows. If you're listening to this on the day that it comes out, February 3rd, I am doing a virtual show at 8 p.m. Eastern via Zoom. It's a stand up comedy show. And I'm also going to be doing a Forkful recording later this month as well, February 24th. I'm going to be talking about Cuba. I'm going to be talking about the history of Cuba, and really the complicated why the history of Cuba is so complicated and what makes it complicated. Looking at a little bit of a psychological lens of that history as well, because of the players involved. So if that's of interested to you, be sure to mark down February 24th for that show. I will have ticket links coming up very soon, but all those ticket links will be available on my website at krishmohanhaha.com. It's KRISHMOHANHAHA.com. So, with that being said, if you go to my website, you can also become a sustaining member, make a one-time donation, check out my other stand-up comedy albums. You can download it, and a lot of them are also available for free directly on my website. So yeah, that's all. That's all available. I'm also going on tour with my good friend Ron Placone, who I haven't seen in quite some time. So I'm very excited to be on that tour. We're going to be on the road from April 16th through the 25th. We're coming to Pittsburgh. We're coming to Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. Three Canadian cities. I've only performed in Montreal once. I'm very excited to come up there. We are also coming to Burlington, Portland, Maine, Boston, Massachusetts, and New York City. So if you're in those cities, go to ronplacone.com or my website, krishmohanhaha.com, and grab your tickets. Come hang out with us. Live shows are important, you guys, and we haven't really had a full opportunity to enjoy live shows. And Ron and I are both, as much as we want to do these tours, and we also want safety involved. So please do respect what the venues have to say. And please do respect our health and safety. As much as everybody has the right to do what they want, we performers, we comedians and musicians and entertainers and the venues themselves and the staff at the venues have the absolute freedom and right to feel safe and healthy doing what we love doing and doing the thing that helps us earn our income. So please do respect that. We're not here to try to get into an ideological battle when it comes to ticket purchases. But what we do want is for everybody to be respectful and kind and compassionate and understanding to each other and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, check out what the venue has to say in regards to COVID rules. It's some and it's the venue's decision. It's our decision to keep people safe and feel safe ourselves. So check that out. But I'm very excited to go on these tours. I am very excited to get back to live performing in general. I will say that it now that we're kind of out of the holidays, it's starting to become a little bit more of a regular thing. So I am excited that they're coming back. Hopefully, this will mean that I will probably do a few more shows, specifically a few more local shows. Aside from this tour with Ron, I don't have a lot of stuff booked out yet. I am going to kind of wait till the end of February to make that decision before booking anything. I right now the plan is I have a couple of dates that I would like to do solo. There's a few dates that I would like to that Lee Camp and I are talking about that we will be doing. There was a lot of shows that from 2020 that both of us still have to make up. And then the other thing too is I want to be on the road with my good friend Zach Funk, and we have to figure out when we can do what regions, because we both, I don't think, are at the place where we can just go out on the road for 2-3 weeks at a time. I also don't particularly want to do that right now in my life. I think doing some weekend runs and occasional 10 day 12-day tours is cool and great, but again, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, so we still have to take that into account. And remember, going to different cities and then coming back home and being around the people that I would normally be around, it's not the safest decision. So I would have to make sure I can get a test. I would have to make sure that the venues are taking the precautions to keep things safe. So I'm not just thinking about my own health and safety in regards to making these decisions. I'm thinking about everybody in my life's health and safety, and then who's in the periphery of their lives as well, and their health and safety as well. So I'm not trying to avoid live shows altogether. I'm just there is a safety issue to take into consideration, but that seems to be shifting. We seem to be kind of reaching this endemic stage of this pandemic, which means we're gonna have to figure out how to live with this thing, and especially when a country like the United States isn't really doing the greatest job of taking care of this thing, and or even correcting its mistakes. The onus, unfortunately, falls on we the people, and we the people have to learn how to be understanding, compassionate, respectful, and all that sort of stuff. And the culture in America doesn't really help that, does it? So yeah. Anyway, very long and short, very very long way of saying, well, there might be live dates coming. The best way to keep up with that, though, is to go to my website, krishmohanhaha.com, sign up for my email list, and keep up to date there. So, okay, this was a very long closer. Sorry about that. By the way, the people that stick around to the very end of this thing, you guys are fucking champions. You guys are awesome. And hey, if you do, leave a comment, retweet the tweet from this episode, or share it on Facebook or something, and I'll give you like a free download of my album or something. How's that sound? To do a little share, little share contest. I just thought of this right now. How about that? If you reach to the very end of this thing, hit the share, type something nice about it, and I will. I'll send you a free download code of Politely Angry. Cool. All right. With all that said and done, let's wrap this thing up. I'm sure you guys have places to be, things to do, maybe some sleep to catch up on. And as I wished at the top of the show, I hope you have sweet, wonderful dreams of destroying capitalism, as I often do. All right, you guys are awesome. Be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and stay taboo, everybody. We'll see you.